aquariumradio.com.
Aloha and welcome to Aquarium Radio at aquariumradio.com. And we are here on an episode of the Eki Speaks here on Aquarium Radio, and I'm your host, Jen Lesson, with my co-host, anthropologist Dr. Sasha Lesson. Today's program is in the Eki Speaks series. It's called Inner Earth Visitor from Agartha. John Leith interviews P. Haraman. How do you pronounce it? Harman, okay. And this is Visitor from Agartha. It's part 3 of the series Agartha Inner Earth Civilizations. And our source for this information is Genesis for the Space Race, the Inner Earth and the Extraterrestrials by John Leith.
The Earth's 700-mile thick mantle crusts Agartha, which is the civilization within it. Our sun, the one on top, creates the gravity inside the planet too. There's passageways from the Earth's surface that lead into the hollow inside. Land masses inside the Earth have housed the advanced civilizations for millions of years. The vast majority of Agartha's people once lived on the surface before they went underground. The ancestors of Hyperborea, Atlantis, Lemuria, and Nazi Germany went underground. Nowadays, all Agartha's people live peacefully. They keep contact with both extraterrestrial skyfaring people as well as selected Earth surface nations like our own. Many species that are now extinct on the surface of the Earth, like mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, trees that are hundreds of yards tall, and grapes that grow as big as plums, live in Agartha. Some Agarthan cities house people that are over 12 feet tall. In Agartha, daylight never ends. A smoky sun, that's this nucleus of an Earth, in the nucleus of the Earth, hovers over the center of the hollow Earth. This inner sun makes an orange hue and keeps Agartha's temperature at 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Water covers 1/4 of Agartha, land 1/3 of Agartha. Agartha's people built about 100 crystal-like cities.
German soldiers settled in Brazil and built subterranean towns. Excuse me. In 1572, Portugal King Sebastian I hired a German named von Luckner and 250 German soldiers, and each had a wife, and he hired them to build a Portuguese fort on the upper Amazon. Indians ambushed the Germans and burned their ships. The Germans retreated into a cavern entrance. They found the cavern opened into a series of warm tunnels littered with traces of human occupation. They found an 80 to 100 degree, 75 square mile cavity with a 300-foot high ceiling, fresh water, and a rich soil floor, and they built a village there. In 1650, Wagner from von Luckner's village found another habitable cavity and built a village. They grew barley that photosynthesized the glow of the rock walls. Deeper in the tunnels, the moles met hostile groups already settled in cavern pockets. The earlier subterranean settlers told the moles several races fled underground to avoid upheavals and floods on the surface. These earlier refugees built hundreds of cities 350 feet to many miles under the earth and seas. By 1632, the moles built their own chain of underground towns: Hagner, Breiter, Brightter, Celestine, and Kitchener. They built a chain of rails to join them in the towns. What are moles, honey?
Moles are the name given to the German colonists who Portugal sent to the upper Amazon to stand on the other side against the Spanish that were on the other side. And they were called moles because the Indians drove them to a cave, and when they got in the cave, they started finding tunnels and digging tunnels until ultimately they got to between Australia and New Zealand. But they're called moles, the German moles, because there were other Germans that were already there. And as Janet reads on, you'll learn more about that.
New Atlantis, Arturia, undersea, that's Atlantus, Aturia undersea between New Zealand and Australia. In 1647, the German moles dug into a huge cavity under the ocean bed between New Zealand and Australia. A faint man-made orb lit and warmed the cavity. The people there called themselves New Atlanteans or Aturians. They drove horses, four-wheeled cars, and flew silent, round-winged craft. They said they enjoyed living very healthy, long lives. The Aturians asked the ambassador from Bodland, another lower world continent, to help him deal with the moles. The Bod found the moles, and he spoke the same German root language. He took the moles to Bodland. Okay, that's your part.
Okay, so Bodland is the dominant force under the Antarctic. The Bods said that 30,000 years ago, their ancestors from Iran, Syria, and Pakistan, who were then called Bachis, went underground to escape a vicious race with superior weapons and aircraft. The invaders leveled the Bachi cities and killed millions. Many years later, the Bods reached the inner world via tunnels and pockets in the Earth's mantle. The Bodlanders asked the Aturians to settle the German moles on a relatively unoccupied continent adjacent to Bodland in the southern hemisphere on the condition that they live in peace and friendship and never return to the surface, and the moles accepted this condition. Early in the 1700s, the moles, who are now called the New Germans to distinguish them from the old German Bodlanders, the New Germans, the moles, let the German royals send their oldest sons to upper world Germany, and the Bods swore the boys to secrecy and flew them in anti-grav craft to the surface to attend university in upper world Germany. In upper world Germany, the new German students passed as sons of rich German planters along the Amazon. One of the boys, Crown Prince von Luckner, returned to Inner Saxony. With the German printing press and in 1853, the moles then brought up an upper German engineer to lower world to shorten their rail system. During World War I, the moles sent a volunteer regiment to the upper world Imperial Germans, but the mole regiment did not fight. Instead, the moles that were on the surface sought their descendants, the descendants of the relatives of the original moles who'd gone to the Amazon in 1572. Imperial Germany demanded as a condition of ending World War I free access through Antarctica via the South Pole to inner Earth. Well, the American representative, Colonel House, showed the German demand to England's Prime Minister, Lloyd George, and George said, give the Germans that icicle land.
In 1829 CE, a Norwegian sailor transversed Agartha. We base our account here on The Smoky God by Willis Erikson. Erikson interviewed and published the notes of Norwegian sailor Olaf Jansen. Norwegian sailor Olaf Jansen said that a storm drove him and his dad in a small fishing sloop near the North Pole into the inner Earth. They returned to the surface world in Antarctica near the South Pole where the dad had drowned. We left Stockholm in our fishing sloop on the 3rd day of April, 1829, said Olaf. We sailed through the Hinlopen Strait, coasted along the northeast land, and sailed along Franz Joseph Land to its west coast. In 24 hours, we came to a 1 or 2 acre warm and tranquil inlet. In front of us to the north lay open sea. They sailed due north for 36 hours till they lost sight of Franz Joseph Land, but the sea felt warmer than Norway 6 weeks before. Then a storm hit them and drove them at a terrific speed. Excuse me. Olaf wrote, most of our provisions tumbled out and swept away before the wind died down. Before us lay an iceless channel 10 or 15 miles wide, with a few icebergs far away to our right and an intermittent archipelago of smaller icebergs to the left. We found less than 1/3 of our provisions remaining. Our water casks had been swept overboard during the violent plungings of our boat. We saw banks were covered with trees and vegetation. The compass still pointed due north and moved on its pivot as it had at Stockholm. The dipping of the needle ceased. We were perplexed. Our direction was now south. We sailed 3 days along the shore, then came to the mouth of a river of immense size, like a great bay. Into this we turned our craft slightly northeast of south. We continued inland into a mighty river, the Hiddekel. After 10 days, we attained a distance inland where ocean tides no longer affected the water, which had become fresh. Olaf and Jens replenished their casks and sailed further upriver. They saw huge trees and forests that stretched miles as they sailed. We landed, wrote Olaf, near a sandy beach, waded ashore, and found nuts that were palatable.
5 months since the Jansons sailed from Stockholm, they heard harps and people singing, and they saw, according to Olaf, a huge ship gliding down river toward them. It lowered a boat of 6 men of gigantic stature who rowed to the sloop. They spoke a strange language, but Olaf said we knew from their manner they were friendly. The leader motioned to ask us whether we leave our craft and go on their ship. So within a few minutes we were aboard their ship. Half an hour later, our craft had been lifted by hook and tackle and set on board. There were several hundred people on board this mammoth ship, which we discovered was called Naz. The ship was called Naz, which meant pleasure excursion. All the men on board the Naz were over 12 feet tall. They all wore full beards. They had beautiful faces. They were fair. They had ruddy complexions. The hair and beard of some was black, others sandy, others yellow. The captain of the Naz was fully a head taller than any of his companions. The women averaged 10 to 11 feet in height, and their features were especially regular and refined, while their complexion was of a most delicate tint, heightened by healthy glow, says Olaf. Olaf said that both men and women seemed to possess ease of manner. My father's 6'3" did not lift the top of his head above the waistline of these people. Each one seemed to vie with the others in extending courtesies and showing kindness to us. They were richly attired, men in handsome tunics of silk and satin belted at the waist. They wore knee breeches and stockings of a fine texture, and encased their feet in sandals, adorned with gold buckles.
We were given, Olaf wrote, into the charge of Jules Galdea and his wife to learn their language. The vessel retraced its course upriver. Its machinery, while noiseless, was very powerful. Banks and trees on either side rushed by. The ship's speed surpassed any railroad train, even here in America. We lost sight of the sun's rays, but the dull red sun gave out white light greater than 2 full moons. In 12 hours, whiteness passed out of sight, and the 12 hours following corresponded with our night. The ship was equipped with electricity and soft lights. In 1829, we of the outside surface of the earth knew nothing then of electricity. After 2 days, the Naz stopped at the city of Jehu. The city featured big, well-made houses. The hillsides sported vineyards, the valleys grain. Gold was everywhere, doors, casings, inlaid in tables, veneered with gold. Domes of the public buildings were gold. Gold was used generously in finishings of the great temples of music. Vegetation grew in exuberance. Fruits of all kinds possessed the most delicate flavor. Clusters of grapes, 4 and 5 feet in length, each grape as large as an orange, and apples larger than a man's head, typified things inside the earth. Along the foothills of the mountains, vast herds of cattle were seen.
So Olaf and his dad learned to speak the language, which was very much like Sanskrit, of these people under the earth. An envoy from a ruler came to see them, he wrote, and for 2 days my father and I were put through questions from where we came, what sort of people dwelt without, what God we worshipped, our religious beliefs, the mode of our living in this and all that in our strange land above. The compass we had brought with us still pointed north, though we'd sailed over the edge of the Earth's aperture and were far south on the inside surface of the Earth's crest, 300 miles in thickness that's how thick it is from the inside where they were to the outside. The luminous cloud or ball of dull red fire, fiery red in the mornings and evenings, and daytime a beautiful white light, is called the smoky god. This sun, the smoky god, seems suspended in the center of the earth, held to its place by power that draws or repels with equal force in all directions. The base of this smoky sun is dark and non-transparent, except for small openings at the bottom, and this is the altar for the deity, they say. It lights the lights come through these openings and twinkle at night, and they look like stars, except larger. The smoky god, with each daily revolution of the earth, appears to come up in the east and go down in the west, and the people believe that the smoky god is stationary and that night and day is produced by the earth's daily rotation.
We were taken, Olaf blogged, overland to the city of Eden in an electrical contrivance that ran on a single iron rail at high speeds, up hills, down dales, across valleys, and along mountains. The car seats were huge, high above the floor of the car. On the top of each car, high-geared flywheels on their sides adjusted as the speed of the car increased. Jules Galdea explained that these revolving wheels destroyed atmospheric pressure, so the car is safe from falling to one side. We learned that the males do not marry before the ages of 75 to 100 years old, and a little bit less. Men and women frequently live from 600 to 800 years. We were brought before the great high priest, ruler over all the land. Our craft had been brought before him. He was richly robed, taller than those about him. He was 15 feet in height. The immense room in which he received us was finished in gold slabs of gold studded with jewels. Eden is located in a beautiful valley on the loftiest mountains. Fruits, vines, shrubs, trees, and flowers grow in 4 rivers, the Euphrates, the Pison, the Gihon, and the Hiddekel, that have had their source in mighty artesian fountain, divide and flow in 4 directions. We were given an audience of 2 hours with the high priest, who seemed kindly disposed and considerate. He asked us numerous questions about which his emissaries had failed to inquire. The high priest asked the Jansons whether they wished to remain in this country or return to the outer world. Olaf revealed that his father replied, "It would please me and my son to visit your country and see your people, your colleges and palaces of music and art, your great fields, your wonderful forests of timber, and after we have had this pleasurable privilege, we would like to return to our home on the outside surface of the earth. This son is my only child, and my good wife will be weary awaiting our return." "You will find it difficult to return," replied the priest. "Visit the different countries with Galdea as your escort. When ready to return outside, your boat shall be put on the river Hiddekel's mouth, and we will bid you Jehovah speed."
So Olaf continues. We visited villages, towns, and the cities of Niji, Delphi, and Hectea. Father was called upon a half-dozen times to go over the maps he gave of the outside earth. We came to a forest of gigantic trees near the city of Delphi. The people there were exceedingly musical and learned in arts and sciences, especially geometry and astronomy. In cities, the underworlders built palaces of music. In their palaces of music, 25,000 voices of this great giant race swelled forth in mighty choruses. Inner-world children don't go to school until they reach 20 years old. Then their school life begins and continues for 30 years, 10 of which are devoted by both sexes to the study of music. The Jansons saw inner-world industries, architecture, agriculture, horticulture. The inner earth raised huge cattle herds and built travel vehicles. 3/4 of the inner surface of the earth, according to Jansen, is land and 1/4 is water. Olaf cites huge rivers that are as wide as 30 miles and that run from the inner world to the outer world. The waters from the inner freeze and are pushed out to sea like huge tongues of ice by the abandoned freshlets of turbulent waters that twice a year sweep everything before them. Prolific bird life, including birds with 30-foot wingspans, greeted the Jansons from seashore to mountain. Galdea, says Olaf, took us to an inlet where we saw thousands of tortoises along the sandy shore. These tortoises were 25 to 30 feet in length, from 15 to 20 feet in width, and fully 7 feet in height. One day, says Olaf, we saw a great herd of elephants, must have been 500 of them, tearing huge boughs from the trees and trampling smaller growth into dust. These elephants were over 100 feet in length and from 75 to 80 feet in height. A hazy mist goes up from the land each morning in the underworld. It rains once every 24 hours. In places, the level valleys stretch away for many miles in every direction. The smoky god, their inner sun, is clear white light looks calmly down on us. We spent more than a year, Olaf says, visiting the cities within the world and in the intervening country, and it was more than 2 years from the time we had been picked up by the underworlders in the river.
The Jansons told the high priest they wanted to return to the surface world. Our host, Olaf said, gave Father maps showing the inside surface of the earth, its cities, oceans, seas, rivers, gulfs, and bays. They'd offered us bags of gold. We returned to Jehu and spent a month overhauling our sloop. The ship Naz that originally discovered us took us on board and sailed to the mouth of the river Hiddekel. The winds blew from the northern opening of the earth towards Olaf's sense of south, but which by the Jansen's compass was directly north. Olaf's father said to return by the same route as we came in is impossible now. The only thing we can do is go south. He turned the craft about and started, ignoring the compass, for what he felt was really due south. In 40 days, Olaf said, we arrived at Delphi, a city near the mouth of the Gihon River. Here we stopped for 2 days, entertained by the same people who welcomed us in our former visit. We laid in provisions and set sail for the south, which is what we sensed. On our outward trip, Olaf related, we came through a narrow channel separating water between two considerable bodies of land. We waited ashore to rest up for a day before continuing the outward hazardous undertaking. There was a mild, luminous light from the outer sun shining in from the south aperture of the earth. The atmosphere grew colder. Winds filled our sails from the warm climate within the earth. The compass behaved in the same drunken fashion over the southern curve of the earth as it had on our inbound trip at the northern entrance. An iceberg hit the Jansons' boat. Olaf's father, Jen, drowned. A whaling ship, the Arlington, picked Olaf up. When Olaf recovered the Arlington, Captain Angus McPherson, according to Olaf, asked where had I come from and how I came to be alone in an iceberg in the Antarctic Ocean. I replied that I had come from inside the earth. I told him how Father and I had gone in by way of Spitsbergen and come out by the way of the South Pole. And McPherson threw Olaf in irons. Olaf wrote, I heard the captain say that I was crazy and must remain in confinement until I was rational enough to give a truthful account of myself. I decided to invent some story that would satisfy the captain and never again refer to my trip. Olaf paid the captain off and went to Stockholm, where he found his mother had died. A relative got him committed to a mental institution, where he remained for 28 years.
In 1909, okay, so that's the story of Olaf. Just to finish it up, he got out of the mental hospital. He worked as a seaman. He eventually got a fleet of boats. He became very rich, and before he died, he dictated his everything that he had recorded carefully to Willis. Okay, so now we're going to leave this. We're going through the different some of the different research that we've seen on the inner Earth, and so that was the story of these Norwegian fellows back in the 19th century. Okay, so in 1909, we have a report about a society of green men who lived in a subterranean colony in Tibet and their reptilian allies. And these green men in Tibet and their reptilian allies had Germany's emissary to Imperial Japan, Karl Hochschild. They had Hochschild train Hitler to ally Germany and Japan to conquer Russia, to rule the Eurasian landmass, to confront the Western European and Anglo-American alliances, and conquer their segment of the galaxy by 5000 CE. This was the program of the ETs that were, or the green men connected with the Under-Earth that were instructing the Nazis. The green men were connected with the underground empire of reptilian extraterrestrials from Alpha Draconicus, which are said to extend from southwestern Tibet across India to Benares in India. This empire of green men is called Patala, or Snake World, home of the Nagas, serpent race, and the Greys from Zeta Reticula. It's a 7-level complex of huge caverns and tunnels deep underground. The Nagas, in alliance with extraterrestrials from Orion, had already enslaved civilizations in 21 star systems in a nearby section of the galaxy, and they chose the South Pole as a jumping off point for their missions in this galactic neighborhood. Well, the Nazis had a pact with the reptilians in 1933 that resulted in the transfer of advanced technology to Germany, including anti-gravity discs. The reptilians invited the Nazis to build a colony next to one they and their gray allies kept in Antarctica. The German Nazis designed their Antarctic base, called Neuschwabenland, as a joint German alien scientific and technological development for interplanetary conquest. In 1943, the Nazi Himmler picked 10,000 blonde, blue-eyed 17 to 14-year-old Ukrainian women and 2,500 SS soldiers to Neuschwabenland, 4 women for each soldier, and sent them there to Antarctica in subs to breed Aryans for the Nazis. Stalin told Churchill and Truman that Hitler himself fled to Neuschwabenland and had his double killed back in Berlin.
The rest of the German population was left to perish in the Allied onslaught. This core Aryan colony would breed the new race. With superior weapons and extraterrestrial friends, the New Schwabenland civilization would establish the Fourth Reich, take over and enslave the inferior races on the rest of the planet. When, as they expected, Earth's poles again shifted 90 degrees, most people would die, but Antarctica would move to a temperate climate near the equator, and the Antarctic Aryans would remain safe in their secure redoubt under the 2-mile mantle of Earth. The British twice attacked, and the Germans at New Schwabenland twice beat them. In 1945, the Nazis sent, after they built their own craft, German and Japanese astronauts in one of the anti-gravity craft to Mars. In 1946, Truman sent 13 ships, 2 icebreakers, 2 destroyers, 2 tenders carrying 3 seaplanes each, 2 tankers, 2 supply ships, 1 submarine, 2 helicopters, the aircraft carrier Philippine Sea, carrying 6 DC-3 twin-engine planes, the flagship Mount Olympus, and 4,700 Marines, and announced this combat fleet would just explore, and that's all. Byrd's fleet encountered several flying discs that emerged from the water and attacked the ships in a 20-minute engagement in the Weddell Sea. The discs were protecting the entrance to the tunnel. Flying discs sunk the Pine Island and killed 68 Marines. Discs also zapped one of the seaplanes and killed 3 seamen on board. Truman ordered the invasion canceled. Byrd wanted Antarctica nuked, but Truman had him silenced. The U.S. military had already seen a German-made disc without wings or rudder overtake and explode our Liberator plane, leading a formation of Allied aircraft over Switzerland, then zoom out of sight. Byrd's defeat convinced the U.S. was defenseless against the Nazi craft. The Nazi craft had direct gyroscope stabilization, television-controlled flight, vertical takeoff and landing, and jam-free radio control, radar blinding, infrared search eyes, electrostatic weapon firing, hypercombustible gas combined with a total reaction turbine, and anti-gravity flight technology. The Germans and Japanese had already successfully landed one of these craft on Mars in 1945. The Nazis and the Draco allies coveted Earth. Our military feared defeat from the discs. Fortunately, people called EBEs, extraterrestrial biological entities, from the planet Serpo had been monitoring our nuclear testing sites and gave us this technology that let us make our own anti-gravity discs, able to repel Nazi discs. Our military feared defeat from the discs. Fortunately, people... that's a repeat. Okay. The EBEs in the U.S. created an exchange program. 12 American men would live 13 years on Serpo, the ET's home planet, while an ambassador from Serpo would brief the American military making our discs. The ambassador would assist President Kennedy's Defense Information Agency in its mission to disclose our ET exchange with Serpo.
So now we come to Lath's 1977 interview with Professor Harman in the U.S. He was here with an Iceland visa. Harman is from Etruria, one of the old German-speaking nations of the inner earth. Ley describes Harman like this. He was 6'3", built like a football player, but his hands were slender like a pianist's. He looked like a modern Scandinavian. Harman's a professor in an Eastern university, and this is in 1977 when Leith wrote this. Harman has been harassed by officialdom for talking, and he's afraid of deportation. Harman's Etruria is a country of 300 million people. He lived in the Etrurian capital, which is called Shambhala, which is a city of several million Sanskrit-speaking people. Shambalans ride magnetic spacecraft, air-conditioned electric trains, and they have four-wheeled carts, they have trucks and buses that are powered by magnetic, hydroelectric, nuclear fission, as well as solar energy from their artificial sun. Electric outlets are located at roadside intervals of 25 miles, from which a 3-minute charge of renewed power is drawn at no cost. Cars have a driving range of 100 miles. Free energy vehicles are also used by the Etrurians. Etrurians make concrete blocks and glass tiles. They make highways with grooves that mesh with car tires so that the cars won't spin out. Agarthans may travel to any inner world country without a visa. All are at peace, backed by the Bodlanders' anti-grav craft. There is at the same time a colony of Eskimos who continue the traditional lifestyle in Agartha. We have, said Harman, a private enterprise system, as do the Bodlanders and the people of Viking land. We in Etruria also have a hereditary king, and so do the Vikings, the Bods, and the old Germans. The present Bodland monarch, King Hakas III, was appointed for life in 1928. In Etruria, a prime minister is in charge and is elected by parliament on recommendation of the king. The prime minister presides over the upper and lower houses of parliament. The king and the prime minister must approve all bills. There's a term of office for 15 years. Lower and upper houses are for 5-year terms by citizens. Etruria forbids lobbying. In 1946, the paper currency of each nation is freely converted. All currency is collected annually to prevent hoarding. New serial money is issued so that you can't hoard. The coins are mostly gold, and the central government owns all the gold.
Etruria has full-time grade schools, college geared to each student's abilities and interests. Bodland students must attend a state-run tuition-free high school. Youth of both sexes serve 2 years in defense forces, then all hold full-time jobs while young. We have, Hanman said, a standing Air Force of you called unidentified flying objects. We Etrurians have had 11,500 years of peace since Noah's flood on the surface, and the Bodlanders 30 millennia. Retirement's voluntary retirement citizens may opt for part or full-time employ while old. Medical care is free for all. Etruria wiped out all diseases of aging, and many live up to 900 years. Etrurians have skin grafts, synthetic bones, and implant tooth buds when needed. Etrurian married men and women live apart but have houses for sexual visitation. Bodlanders are more family-oriented than Etrurians. Excuse me. Bodlanders live, play, and entertain as a unit until the children leave home. There are no divorces in Etruria or Bodland. Childbearing age in Etruria is from 25 to 60 years of age. Marriages take place after 25. Children live with their mothers till 10 and afterwards are trained by the state. The family connection is never broken. Women are permitted to have only 2 children. Agarthians hold inter-world Olympic Games with the Vikings, 6 different German kingdoms, and the Bodlanders. For leisure, Agarthians hike, race, sail, play, and watch baseball, football. They watch movies in theaters and shows and TV at home. Hammonds told Lee harmful ultraviolet rays cause death to those on Earth's surface. Your upper sun rays also kill certain fruit and vegetable cells that contain life-supporting elements. We Etrurians have an artificial sun 600 miles in diameter. Our artificial sun lights up our interior world That sun takes its energy via crystal receivers from the outside sun and stores it, but the harmful rays are not transmitted. Our inner Earth is activated in part through the solar sun shining through the poles throughout the year. This artificial sun was built in Atlantis, transported inside by our spaceships, then first charged by the real sun after being orbited in Earth's interior. Our lead-protected ray men go in periodically and check the lantern for replacement parts. The refractory crystals are everlasting. Guns are legal in Eturia. Eturians consider crime a mental illness, and first offenders go to the state's psychiatric hospital. Third offenders are banished to an island prison, and a judge may order painless death for rape, kidnapping. Eturians grow rice within Agartha and also buy it from China. Eturians also grow wheat, barley, string beans, soybeans, okra, eggplant, cabbage, turnips, and carrots. They eat fish, quail, and drink milk.
Harmon told Leith that the Earth's mantle is honeycombed with underground tunnels and caverns which open to the surface in specific policed places. Quotes, there are tunnels at various depths, containing very ancient and vast civilizations. We use the tunnels to communicate between the Eturian capital of Shambhala and the subterranean kingdom of the far north under Siberia. Openings exist in the USA, too. There are major cities supported by steel domes under the ice caps of the polar regions. The Antarctic ice-covered polar cities connect by train tunnels to subterranean mantle cities under the ocean. A third of the tunnel cities are natural, and the remainder are man-made. There are 28 cities underwater, each being reached by saucer craft as well as tunnel trains. The undersea city near San Juan, Puerto Rico, is round in shape and 10 miles in diameter and is occupied by millions of Eturians. All our undersea cities, Hamann says, are connected with Shambhala. Atlanteans, Badlanders, and Athenians occupy the inner earth as well as the domed cities on the bottom of the ocean.
And that's it for today's program, which was Inner Earth, Visitor from Agartha. And there's more information on this story, references and illustrations at EnkiSpeaks.com. Before we sign off, I was just thinking that with all those peoples on the inner Earth, I wonder how many people there are on this planet, but in and occupying planet Earth. It might be closer to, there might be 1 billion people or 2 billion people. Do you have any idea?
I have no idea, but one of my informants tells me that there's been a huge amount, almost nightly, of anti-grav craft that have been leaving Agartha for the last several months. And he speculates that this might be something to do with impending arrival of Nibiru, or the event that the Georgia Guidestones predict, where there's going to be terrible things happening on Earth. I don't about any of that. I don't know, but that's what one of my informants says.
Okay, well that also brings the question, which you may or may not know the answer, but if there are turbulences in space, like Nibiru coming, that cause everything to flip or whatever, because the oceans are connected, inner and outer, wouldn't they have an effect on the inner world as well, or would they have no effect on the inner world?
They definitely affect everything. You have to understand, fresh water pours out of the inner world, and as it hits the frozen poles, it turns into these long fingers of icebergs, which then break up into places. So the water is coming from the inner Earth. How it gets there, it probably percolates down through, but there's rivers, and the warm rivers. It's warm under there. My American Indian friends tell me about there's many entrances in the Grand Canyon and in Indian Territory where the general public can't go, which are connected to inner Earth. And the Hopi people and the Zuni people talk about how small folks, the ant people they call them, rescued them from Noah's flood, took them up by Sedona, and as the flood started to subside, told them to go out and get survivors, and then transported them in their anti-grav craft to their present location, Hopi and Zuni land, around the Four Corners. And of course, later on, the Navajo were brought in to challenge them. But in any case, the Russians had evidently had an entrance which was sealed off during the Soviet period. The Bodlanders didn't want anything to do with communist Russians. And so there's a lot of stories, and there's really not much I can tell about the veracity of them, other than there's this historical set of studies. There's lots of things in the Buddhist literature. There's things in the scientific literature that are indicating very strongly that there is this inner civilization, Agartha, and it's peaceful. And after Operation Paperclip, when the Nazis were put in charge of everything in the United States by Allen Dulles, this Nazi sympathizer, and von Braun was continuing to send information out as a spy all the time. But in any case, the Germans that have taken over our world for their Fourth Reich seem to be in charge on the surface now, but the inner Germans are said to be peaceful. So I don't know where all this is going, but we hope to find out.
Okay,
it's not unpleasant.
We'll keep researching. If you have any information, please contact us at aquarianradio@gmail.com, aquarianradio@gmail.com. We're interested in hearing what you might have learned. And I think that's enough for this episode. So without further ado, we will see you again next time. Much love and blessings, and aloha.
Thanks for joining us today on Aquarian Radio. We broadcast daily, and our schedule is on aquarianradio.com. Listen live by calling 646-649-0893, or you can listen live by calling 646-649-0893, or listen to our archives on aquarianradio.com. Join us again soon, and do tell your friends. The age of Aquarius and the paradigm of peace is now.